severe since the start of the full-scale war. We are fighting for the robust alliance of our allies in Europe because Russia is destabilizing certain countries, even some of our neighbors. So we are fighting for this alliance, and we are also very much fighting for the alliance between the United States and Europe. And I believe that without this robustness, it will be difficult to prevail over Putin, or at least very difficult. So we are fighting for these things. At the same time, we have a plan of resilience, we call it so. So we do everything to preserve our resilience internally in our state. We are fighting for increasing our cybersecurity, energy security, food security, and we are also increasing the production of domestic military products. So that is pretty much it. As regards the battlefield, the situation is very difficult. It hasn't changed much during the last months. We want to decrease the quantity of the Russian military contingent that is conducting assaults against us. We have stabilized situation on certain axes, and the east situation is not yet fully stabilized, and we have a recent challenge with the North Korean troops. So that is pretty much it.
There was a report in the Mail on Sunday newspaper here in the UK yesterday, based on an article written by Ian Duncan Smith, who was a former leader of the Conservative Party in this country. And he said he'd spoken to a high-ranking official from Ukraine who had said to him that you could lose this war within 6 months if you didn't get the support you need, particularly from the United States. Is that true? I mean, could you lose in that timescale if you don't get what you need?
Допомога дуже потрібна.
The aid is very much needed. It is not stopped as of today. So the supplies are going as they were going during the last year or 1.5 years, when the processes were slightly slowed. And certain things did not arrive on time, unfortunately, but they came later. And this gave us the opportunity to support our army, to our defense forces, and undoubtedly to defend against the enemy. As of today, the situation is as it is. It is important that we have started to produce more in Ukraine. So around 40% of the weaponry in 2025 is domestically made. And this gives not the tranquility, but more of the moral belief that we will not be empty. Of course, without the support from the United States of America, or with the slow support, we can lose the bits of our territory. It will not happen that as fast as people say, or some people think, and some enemies. And I'm here not speaking about the British colleague. Please don't get me wrong. But we will be standing as strong as we can. But for sure, if the contribution to Ukrainian defensive capability and security of Ukraine from the United States as of today is now around 30%, so you can imagine what will happen to us without these 30%.
Is it a fact, President Zelensky, that if the Americans under President Trump pull their support and stop their support for Ukraine, that you would lose the war? Is it as simple as that?
If the aid from the United States stops, this is what will happen. I'm sure that this is not only the stoppage of the US support. It will have the influence on the European leaders, very strong influence on the leaders of Europe and leaders of the EU. And if this support holds, this will definitely destabilize the alliance that I have mentioned above, and it will decrease the aid from Europe, and then we will depend not only on the US support, but also on the risk of the disruption of the supplies from European countries. And then it will be not 30% or 35%, it will be at least 60% of our support overall. And therefore, this risk to lose our territory and of Putin's victory, of course, it will be growing. And this is a very serious thing. For sure, without such aid, we cannot get by. Look at us and look at Russia. They are a big country, but with the help of our partners, we are fighting, I believe, with dignity, and the Russians do not have a great advantage over us. Only because of the slow aid to Ukraine, it happens so. Something did not arrive, something we were lacking, and that influenced the situation. And the morality, and not only the morality of our army and of the people of Ukraine, of civilians who very much count on the support. Therefore, the stoppage of the support, heavens forbid, and I'll believe that President Trump will not make such steps. He will not stop the support to Ukraine, because that will definitely influence the decrease in support from Europe, and that is a high risk. In the end of the day, the support from the United States is not only support to Ukraine, it is the support to all of Europe. And if Ukraine does not withstand, and we have discussed that multiple times, they will go further. They will be in the Baltic states, in Poland. They will go further for sure to Romania, many other states where that can be occupied fastly and can be destabilized fastly.
President Trump said several days ago that he estimates from the intelligence that he's been given by his own people that Russia has lost as many as 600,000 soldiers, and Ukraine has lost 400,000 soldiers and many more civilians. Are those numbers correct? President Trump made fixing the economy an election-winning priority, but let's be clear, there's a lot of fixing to be done. US national debt is at crisis levels, inflation has made life more expensive for everybody, and the stock market is precarious. Enough to make anyone's financial future feel grim. So what's the solution? Well, a simple one is to get out of the chaos and invest in something solid and reliable, like physical gold and silver. And when it comes to making that move, only one name you need to remember: American Hartford Gold. This company has earned the trust of thousands of customers, including me, with an A+ rating from the Better Business Bureau and glowing reviews that you can see for yourself. They offer a huge range of gold and silver bars and coins. These can be delivered directly to your door, or they'll help you set them up in a tax-advantaged gold IRA. They have first-class customer service to make this process simple, secure, and straightforward. This is a company that's committed to getting the truth out there and giving you peace of mind in uncertain times. And if that wasn't enough, you'll get up to $15,000 worth of free silver when you make your first purchase and mention my name, Piers. So take a look for yourself. Call 866-692-2474 or text Piers, that's Piers, to 65532. That's 866-692-2474 or text Piers, Piers, to 65532. I've got no hesitation in telling you this is a smart move. You'll find details in the show description. Now back to the show.
Я думаю, так на сьогодні.
I think the following way, approximately. Around 350,000 Russians have been killed. There are a lot of them missing in action. I do not fully know, but around 50 to 70,000 missed in action Russians. Further, they have around 600,000, 700,000 wounded, approximately. The ratio is 1 to 2 dead, wounded, because their field medicine is weaker than ours, and they do not bring people who are wounded back. If a person is wounded on the battlefield, it stays there. So the estimates are approximately like that, but they are very clear to reality. As regards our people, the exact numbers are very important for us. 45,100 people are dead. and we have around 390,000 cases of people being wounded. Here, let me be precise, the number of people wounded is bigger than the number of wounded people, actually, because there are people who've been wounded and then they came back to the battlefield and have been wounded again. So the numbers of wounded is 390,000. That is the situation, but the number of people is less.
Є проблематика.
We have troubles with three types of numbers. The first one is thousands of people who are missing, and these are really thousands.
Скільки з них
And how many of those are really missing and how many are prisoners, I do not, as of today, know the precise number, but we are working on it. And thousands really of the men are prisoners of war. The precise number depends again on the thousands of missing in action, what happened to them. So that is the estimation as of today. And the third number that we do not understand fully is children. We believe that 19,500, 19,800 people, kids were forcefully brought to Russia from the temporarily occupied territories. That is what we understand. Although, let me be frank, we do not know how many kids were killed on the occupied territories, and it is understandable that we do not know how many thousands of civilians from the law enforcement agencies, from the state institutions that have been captured. So how many of those people are in captivity or have been killed? So these numbers, they indeed very much influence the overall statistics.
The Russians, through the Kremlin spokesman, Dmitry Peskov, have today said that they can't discuss a potential four-way peace talk between yourself, Vladimir Putin, Donald Trump, and a European representative, because they believe you are now an illegitimate president, because you were due to have an election in May of last year, and because you're operating as a country under martial law, you were not able to have that election. They're now trying to say that this makes you an illegitimate president, and who no longer has the democratic will of his people. What do you say to that?
Я хотів би повернутись трішки.
I would like to come back one step before the full-scale invasion in the first place.
десь по телефону, і це було з Путіним.
I truly wanted to have a telephone call even with Putin after our meeting in Normandy format a couple times, after we have made an agreement on the ceasefire that they have violated. We had a couple of phone conversations with Putin, and then he disappeared for more than 1 year. And after this disappearance, the full-scale invasion began. For all this time, I have tried, and your colleagues can trace it, and others can trace it in public domain, not publicly. You asked leaders in the US, in Europe. I have appealed to everybody, and I very much wanted to speak to him, to have the opportunity to meet with him, and to speak on any without any conditions, to just meet and have the dialogue regarding the end of the war, ceasefire again, and before the full-scale invasion, the exchange of all the prisoners. I wanted to bring our citizens back. What then said his press secretary, his spokesperson? What can we speak about? There is nothing to speak about. We don't understand the reasons for the meet in Ukraine is disrupting the truce, although they were shelling constantly, and I very much wanted that we simply preserve the agreements. This does not work with them. So with them, the opportunity to end the war does not work out. This did not work out. Then they were sure of their strength. They understood that they always wanted to to destroy Ukraine. Now they're looking for other reasons because they're not willing to end the war. They do not want to end this war. Tomorrow they will say that they are ready to meet directly with Trump, that Ukraine, they don't need it because this is not the war of Russia against Ukraine. They have just some operation there, and this is a global war of Russia against NATO, and NATO is the United States, so we are ready to speak only with the United States. But that is all preposterous. They do not want to end the war. Putin has only one desire, that Ukraine does not exist. So I definitely don't suit them because they need their puppet person here. They want their man that will be ruling Ukraine, and sincerely that was what happened, what was before the war, and previously when they had the second party by size in Ukrainian parliament, they were influencing Ukraine to never choose the European path, so that Ukraine always stays under the foot of Russian Federation. Their desire is to place their men. And honestly, they want to do basically what they have done in Chechnya, when they have destroyed it to the ground, and that is the part of their territory now. They have done it in Georgia, at first the frozen conflict, and then they have installed their people to rule the state. That is what they always do. They've done that basically in Belarus. So there is Lukashenko there, and there is no independence there. Basically, they have signed a treaty between Russia and Belarus that Belarus gave up its independence to Russian Federation. This is what's going on. He doesn't care who is the president here. Matters only that this is the person that is against Western values, against the West, against the EU, that will perceive NATO as the enemy, just as Russia perceives it. At least the Kremlin does everything that their society considers NATO to be an enemy, and aggressive entity, despite the fact that NATO is a defensive alliance that does not assault anybody. That is what's going on. As regards my legitimacy, I was elected by 73% of my population. 73%. And, I always said that I am open to any elections. Yes, during the war there can be no elections. The legislation has to be changed, the constitution, etc. There are big challenges. But there are not legal but very human things. How our military will vote. That is not the question from me, from average Ukrainians. That is the question from all Ukrainians, from the military. How can they vote in the readouts? How can people on the occupied territories vote? Millions of people. How? How they will express whom they want to elect? How will 8 million Ukrainians vote that are abroad because of the war? Undoubtedly, the war will end. The hot stage of the war will end, and then, when the martial law ends, then definitely elections will be called. That is needed. We are defending democracy, so that is needed. But please understand one thing. Today, everybody understands that if we end martial law now, that is what Putin wants. That will mean that our army, in its majority, it will come back home. And it is just, if there is no martial law, they will come back to their families, and they will come back home. Who will be protecting us? What security guarantees does Ukraine have? Why Russia will not come again with occupation against us? They will. Without security guarantees, that is not possible. So we need answers to these questions.
President Zelensky, when I interviewed you 4 months after the war started, you made it clear that you would not be prepared to cede 1 inch of land, of Ukrainian land, to Russia. And you were determined to win the war, and you believed you would win the war. You've certainly been giving signals in recent months that your position may have changed through necessity and that you might be prepared to consider a peace deal that would involve surrendering some territory to Russia, albeit very reluctantly. Is that now your position? Do you accept you will not get back all of the Ukrainian territory that Russia has taken?
Сьогодні ми не можемо
Now we cannot return all our territories. We are adequate people.
заради
We cannot lose millions of people for the result that, and it is not yet clear that it will happen. As of today, therefore, as of today, we cannot neither violate the oath that we gave to the people who have lost their lives for the sake of us in this war. We cannot violate the constitution, and we cannot recognize the occupied territories as Russian. Yes, we know that is temporarily occupied territories. Therefore, they are temporarily, and therefore, legally, despite the martial law and despite whatever Putin wants and others, we will never recognize these territories as Russian. This is not the question of a compromise or non-compromise. There can be no compromise in the sovereignty of the state. In time, yes. Regrettably, the support that is provided by our partners is insufficient for us to push Putin fully out of our territories. We will bring back. Yes, it may be a combined approach. Here, militarily on the battlefield, as our military do somewhere diplomatically, but nonetheless, we will come back, we will bring back our land because we are right and we did not violate any aspect in international law and morally. Anyway, we are absolutely right in this situation, so everything will come back. For sure, if our partners help to put pressure on Putin, if Trump, and I very much believe that he will make many steps forward, if President Trump, if Prime Minister Starmer, if members of the European Union, if representatives of the global South want the Arab states, China, Latin America, if they want to put pressure on Putin, he will give everything back. But this means everything will go with time. If all leaders are not ready to put pressure on Putin in the alliance, then we will count on our efforts, on the aid from strategic partners, and we will count on time. And I am sure that the justice will definitely come and it will happen. Therefore, there will be no legal compromises regarding the territories. As regards the other things, let me be frank. When somebody asks what Ukraine is ready for, Ukraine is ready in the first place for the end of the hot stage of the war. We want peace as nobody in the world wants, because let's be honest, Putin is a murderer and is a criminal, and that is a fact. And if people believe that we must move to the diplomatic track, and I believe that we are ready to move to the diplomatic track, and that at the negotiating table there must be the United States, Europe, Ukraine, and Russia.
замало компроміс. Ми будемо говорити з Путіним.
We will be speaking with Putin. Don't we make too many compromises? Even the conversation with Putin is already a compromise. Conversation with a thug. And I believe that that is a compromise of the whole civilized world to speak to this person. I am sure of it. Then everybody must be strong, strengthen Ukraine, and not cede Ukraine and Ukrainian interests. We will not cede our interests if the partners are with us, because nobody knows how this conversation will start and how it will end. Nobody knows. But we believe that President Trump, he wants to succeed in this situation, and success is the victory of the common sense. And that is definitely the end to the hot stage of the war, and that is undoubtedly strong security guarantees for Ukraine, at least for the Putin not to come back with the war again in half year, months to 1 year. We must think of our grandchildren. What if Russians decide to come back in 10 years? Isn't that a challenge? That is a challenge. It's the same challenge because these are the losses. Therefore, we must stabilize the situation in as just way as possible without risks for Ukraine and for Europe and for the world.
President Trump, I've actually spoken to him personally about this situation, and he accepts it's very complicated and it's difficult to resolve, but he definitely wants peace. If we move forward to potentially this peace summit with the four groups, as you say, how are you going to feel sitting opposite Vladimir Putin at a negotiating table? Do you think you can do that, given how you feel about him?
Якщо це буде єдина конференція,
If that is the only setup in which we can bring peace to the citizens of Ukraine and not lose people,
Ідемо фігурацію.
definitely we will go for this setup, for the meeting with these four participants. What does it matter what is my attitude to him? I will not be kind to him, and I believe that I consider him an enemy. And to be honest, I believe he considers me an enemy as well. That's it.
Most people who've looked at the situation now from a military and political point of view, they believe the only way that Russia will accept any form of peace deal and sustained ceasefire is if they retain the territory they have so far taken. Is that, in your estimation, is that the most likely scenario where Russia retains the territory it has taken so far, but that you get guarantees of protection, if not full membership of NATO, which is unlikely to be given, I would suggest, then enough guarantees of NATO support and security that you feel confident that he can't then come back and attack you again? I mean, do you think that is the most likely way the hot phase of the war is brought to an end?
я вважаю, дійсно так вважаю, що
I
Інший спосіб перейти до
indeed believe that the fastest way to move to diplomacy is to guarantee today Ukrainian accession to NATO. A strong army, that means the support to the army, because NATO is very, very important. That is support to the people, and that means that we will not be alone if something happens. But I believe that nonetheless, we must guarantee our physical presence, not to decrease the numbers of our army. And even if we decrease the numbers of our army, that this happens without any risks, because the Ukrainian army has to be the biggest in Europe, and it must be in Ukraine. And that was second. And the third thing is that we believe that a great deterrence package will come with a sanctions package. And if sanctions are lifted from the Russian Federation, I believe that this will increase the risk of the second invasion. And therefore, I believe that here we will have to look for the understanding how to solve the situation. So as of now, to speak of the territories that Russia holds by force, why they need it, because honestly, that is nonsense. There are cities that are cut by the front line. Why have certain part of the town? Why Russia needs this half of the town? It's the biggest country on the planet. Why would it need this dead city? If the city is divided, there will be no civilization there, no economy, no investment. There will be many challenges. And please believe me, I remember what was there when I became the president. There was Minsk, there was a contact line, and along that contact line, people were dying on a daily basis. There were no mass murders and no massive artillery shellings, but on a daily basis, something was happening. Anyways, on a daily basis, families lost their close ones. The artillery shelling was coming, and all that was not right. And back then we had the the retreatment of the forces. And today I also heard that from somebody, that there must be a ceasefire, then the forces must retreat. Believe me, that is a means free. We will definitely not accept that. That is not security guarantees for Ukraine. We need guarantees, because the guarantees are important for everybody. I said about NATO because really, and maybe I'm repeating myself, recently I said that NATO is the guarantees for us that Putin is not likely to come with the occupation against. NATO is guarantees for NATO that Ukrainian contingent in the numbers of hundreds of thousands of troops will strengthen them. That is a strong army for NATO. And NATO is guarantees for the Ruskies that Ukraine will not come with war against them, but it will solve all the issues diplomatically. Therefore, I said that NATO is guarantees for everybody, stable and less expensive.
As you know, President Zelensky, Putin's position to his own people has been that the reason for what he calls his special operation, but was clearly an illegal invasion of your country, that the reason for that was NATO encroachment, and that he could not accept the movement, as he saw it, of Ukraine to become a full member of NATO. And given that that is his reason for doing this, albeit it's a very disingenuous reason, but given that's what he tells his people, it is highly unlikely, isn't it, that he's going to accept you now becoming a full member of NATO, even for the territory that he doesn't occupy. So is there a level of guarantee below full membership of NATO that gives you enough security, do you think, to do a deal?
Передусім, він почав окупацію Криму.
First and foremost, he started the occupation with the annexation of Crimea, then Donbass, and then after 8 years, he started the full-scale invasion. But he began at the very beginning, when Ukraine was not candidate for the EU, did not have an invitation to NATO, was not aspiring to get, was not NATO candidate. So we were not members of any alliance. Yes, we very much wanted that, because that is security for Ukraine. But not only him, other countries in the world did not support our NATO membership. So he clearly understood that Ukraine will not be NATO member. He understood that. That means that the reason for the offense was different. Second, during the full-scale invasion, and because of the full-scale invasion, Finland changed the approach to NATO. Sweden changed the approach to NATO. And they received not only the invitation and the guarantees, but they have also become a full-fledged members of NATO. That means that because of his occupation of Ukraine, other countries became NATO members. And again, and thanks God that there is no war in Finland and Sweden. But again, here we see that the reason of the invasion is not because of NATO. Vice versa, some members became some NATO countries are now NATO countries because he began the invasion. And Finland is afraid because they have huge border with Russia. They started to be afraid that Putin will go to Finland. And definitely he wanted and wants. Therefore, they wanted to become NATO members very fast. So here's the reply. The third story. Putin, please look, he will understand that he must end the war when he is clearly explained to. When President Trump says to him, shall you not stop the war? 1, 2, 3 things happen to you. Ukraine receives 1, 2, 3. Then just and when China says to Putin, we've had enough, otherwise we will not support you economically, we will not have cooperation with you between our companies and banks, when there are very clear conditions. And look, I'm not speaking about the threat of the war of big countries against Russia. No, it is enough for them to demonstrate political will and economic steps. And after that, Putin will end the war. He's very afraid of that. He is afraid that his economy will collapse. He is afraid of people becoming rapidly dissatisfied with him. And shall that happen, he will not hold the Kremlin. He will lose the power. That's what he afraid of. So there must be very clear signals. And if it is not NATO, Piers, well, what you are saying, and I'm being very frank, we can look how Ukraine was supported during the war. That was very big money. We have directed all our budget to the war effort, and the United States and EU with military and humanitarian aid helped us with big sums of money. If not NATO, we will need to sustain 1 million army. But the hundreds of thousands that we have will be not enough, because you can see that they are on the offense and we do not have enough to fully them out of our territory. That means that we will need to finance 1 million army at the very least. That is huge money to develop the production, most of our budget, to allocate the funds to defenses, to air defense, to drones, etc., etc. In any case, that is militarization of Ukraine. Do you think we want that? We want security guarantees. We want to invest in social, humanitarian dimensions. We want to rebuild Ukraine, our cultural heritage that was destroyed. We want to develop our state. That is not only military technologies, that is many other things, humanitarian things, medicine, culture, sports. We need money for all that. Where we will get it? That is very difficult. So that's why I believe that NATO is the cheapest option. If not NATO, then we must say that is huge army, huge money. That means plus contingents of other our partners, and undoubtedly that is a big deterrence missile package against the Ruskies if they start to go on offense, that we can use these long-range fires.
I mean, it's a very interesting response. I mean, what I took away from that is that full NATO membership is not a deal breaker for you. In other words, if there can be a package of support in terms of reinforcing your military, paying for that to give you the kind of military protection that you believe you need to deter Putin from attacking again, that you would not necessarily consider full membership of NATO as a deal breaker in any settlement.
Це просто буде великий ризик, що війна.
It will be just a big risk that the war breaks out. We will devote all our lives not to economy, but to the preparation of another invasion of Russia. So with such support and such weaponry, it will be not that scary for us on the one hand, but on the other hand, it will be scary for everybody else, for the businesses, for the economy. Who will put money into Ukraine if people will know that we are not NATO members and that the risk of Russia's attack with big army is increasing? With NATO, it's decreasing, but without it will be increasing. So the contingent that can be present in Ukraine, yes, it can be a deterrence factor against Russia, but Piers, that is all magnificent on the way to NATO. If we are not in NATO, tomorrow we must understand when we are in NATO. And that also adds up to the support. And in all this, I have the question. I would like to ask you a question. You say that Putin started the war, there is such opinion, because we were about to become a NATO member. So then I have the question, if we're now not NATO members, and if some people do not want to get us to NATO, why he doesn't leave our territories? Please agree that there is a logic, and I'm correct.
Well, what I would say is don't mistake what people are saying about this for my own opinion. I mean, let me be clear. Mr. President, let me be clear. I do not personally believe that is the reason he invaded Ukraine. I think he just wanted to get his hands on Ukraine, and he didn't care how many people he killed to do it. But there is, as you know, there are what he tells his people is that he's doing this for the protection of the national security of Russia, that he couldn't have Ukraine joining NATO because that would present an existential threat to the security of the Russian people. I don't agree with that, and that's what he tells his people. And so I'm moving forward to when you're all sitting around a table and you're trying to negotiate your way to an end of the hot stage of the war. I just don't see any way he allows you, as part of that settlement, to become a full member of NATO. And that's why it's interesting to me that you're now outlining a potential plan B, if you like, which involves enough guarantees of security, particularly with the military, that you're able to deter him from attacking again. And I think is that a correct understanding of your position?
Якщо
If
в якійсь перспективі в майбутньому, то
NATO is not today, but in some time in the future, then all this process when we go to NATO, all this time when we are waiting, no matter how long it takes, and unfortunately does not depend on us. If this process is protracted for years or decades, not because of us, but because of partners, then we have absolutely just question what will be defending us against this evil for this whole time on this whole path. Which support package, which missiles, will we be given nuclear weapons? Then let them give us nuclear weapons. Will they give us the missiles in the quantities that we can stop Russia? And I'm not sure of that, but I think it would help. Otherwise, what missiles can stop Russia's nuclear missiles? That is a rhetoric question. So let's do it the following way. Give us back nuclear arms, give us missile systems. Partners, help us finance the 1 million army, move your contingent on the parts of our state where we want the stability of the situation so that the people have tranquility. If we're speaking about this, okay, but here the question arises that I mentioned to you. If we are not in NATO, why is he on our soil? If we're not in NATO, and America says that we are not ready to take Ukraine to NATO, then Putin must fully retreat from our territory. That is logical. Then we will speak about everything else. Financial compensation for all the losses we've suffered. Because there must be logic. He invaded because he was afraid we'll become NATO members. Okay, we're not NATO members. Go back of our land. It must be viewed like that. Because what else?
Do you think, Mr. President, that Ukraine would have been invaded in 2022 if you hadn't surrendered your nuclear defense back in the 90s? In other words, if you still had nuclear weapons, do you think it would have deterred him from invading?
так, він би не втоп.
Yes, he would not invade. Never. He would not invade in 2022 because I'm sure he would get signals. And it is not right to step to the nuclear war because that would destroy the whole world. He would be afraid of that. He would be afraid of his society. They would understand all the risks. Our nuclear weapons was exchanged for nothing. That is influence of Russia. That was the agreement between Russia and the US, that Ukraine gives up nuclear arms. Maybe there were some other players who've been in negotiations, but there were players who were signing the Budapest Memorandum. But the main thing was done by Russia and the US. We lost. We lost protection. We lost our security guarantees. Those were our security guarantees. Definitely because of that he invaded. No, even if we were to give up the nuclear arms, yes, there was such policy in the world, but for what? We should have exchanged it for NATO arms. Because even NATO arms, Piers, honestly, we began to receive it after full-scale invasion. Real arms. Real arms. I'm not speaking about the certain small numbers that was after Crimea during this frozen conflict. After Minsk, we've received certain things, but that was nothing. That is nothing. Now, daily we expend more than we've acquired during the 8 years. On a daily basis, we expend more. So really, NATO arms, NATO protection, and air defense first and foremost, we began to get after 2022. And if honestly, after we managed to stop it, simply to stop, that's it. We had no security guarantees except for the nuclear arms. No, none.
You gave an interview to Associated Press yesterday in which you indicated that a very large amount of money that was supposed to have come to Ukraine from the United States simply didn't arrive, or it was slightly confusing to work out exactly what you were saying, and some people have interpreted it in different ways. I wonder if you could just clarify exactly what you meant by that and explain to those in America who believe that they're just